Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Mountain Lion Foundation and today's webinar, Farms of Change in a Wild Community. My name is Jessica Jansen, and I'm the Development Coordinator for the Mountain Lion Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us today. In this webinar series, we invite you to join us for a conversation about growing food for humans in a changing climate, enhancing, protecting, and preserving the wild landscape, and building community in a multi-species world. The Mountain Lion Foundation recognizes that only through coexistence can we save the mountain lion. I'm excited to introduce you to our guests. First, we have Gowan Baptiste. Gowan's family founded Fortunate Farm in 2013. Together with North Coast Brewing Company, they purchased 40 acres. Gowan manages the whole 40-acre farm as North Coast Sustainability Manager. The 40-acre farm, located in Mendocino County, California, produces heirloom vegetables, fresh cut flowers, and to enhance the diversity of her farm, she also raises flock of sheep and sells the wool to local fiber artists. The mission of her farm is to feed people nutritionally dense foods, sequester carbon, and empower our community. I'm also excited to introduce you to Daniel Firth Griffith. Daniel is a storyteller, a regenerative farmer, and a lover of the wildwoods. A first-generation farmer with a background in high technology and entrepreneurship, Daniel's life pivoted after being diagnosed with a life-threatening and degenerative illness. He turned to farming, which ultimately emerged into regenerative conservation work as the last resort in his health journey. What he found, however, was a life complete with abundance, joy, and health. His published works include Boone, an Unfinished Portrait, and Wildlife Flowers. Gowan, Daniel, would you share with us regenerative farming means to you and how your farms are unique in their operation?
Thank you so much, Jessica. I absolutely love the work that the Mountain Lion Foundation does, and really, really happy to be here with y'all and with Daniel today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here real quick, and bear with me because we're all on rural satellite, so this is not going to be fancy. Here we go. So I'm literally just going to scroll through this, but this is our farm. We're located on the coast in northern Pomo territory. This is a general map of the core 40 acres that we started with. But since then, actually, our friends who started farming with us from the beginning purchased 20 acres on one side. Another friend who's farmed with us purchased 20 acres on the other side. And then another friend is managing about an additional 15 acres on the other side of them. So everything that we are and that happens here, I'm just giving a glimpse into specifically my part of it. All of this is, my extended family, my mom, my auntie and uncle and cousins and lifelong friends. This is a drop in the bucket, and I'm going to speed run it. So hang on. So it's this beat up former mill town. So this land was absolutely hammered, covered in invasive species and dead beetle infested non-native trees. So what we did is we were part of the first carbon farm plan in our county's history to actually go through and scientifically quantify the methods that we were going to use to restore this land. And for us, that includes small scale composting, no-till crop production. I came from like 300 acres of organic row crop farming, and I burnt out on it hard. And so now we grow under the amazing guidance of Laura, who's our brilliant vegetable manager, the absolute bare minimum of vegetables that we need to feed our people. We employ cover cropping, that's Chago and the sheep, cleaning up after the pumpkins. We do a lot of like no-till friendly crops like dahlias and pumpkins. Rotational grazing is a huge part of what we do. These are coyote traps that we found out on the land that my partner manages. I also spend about half my time in Patwin territory on over 6,000 acres of conservation land. So I'm very aware that, we're raising sheep here, which is part of my family's heritage, in the aftermath of this damage that's happened culturally. We do stanchion hand shearing. So low stress, sheep are standing up, sheared by hand, processed, spun on the farm. This is me returning his fleece back to him for a visit. We also grow indigo, which is very cool. The wool that doesn't get boxed up like you see here and shipped off to customers goes into mulching native plants. And actually during the LNU complex fire, some of the oak trees that we mulched in with wool, which is fire resistant, survived being burned over. So that was very cool. We do grazing in community. So this is me and one of my spouses herding 100 sheep down the middle of the road in Petaluma for the Transhumans Festival. And this is us out on a grazing contract. I've been very honored to step into a leadership role with Holy Goats, which is a nonprofit fuel reduction grazing service. So that's our kind of next step in going out into the community, not just about our own homesteads, but protecting people from fire that is out of control and increasing biodiversity. So gorse mitigation is a big part. You can see here the before and after of what the sheep do to it. Literally this plant, it's like Scotch Broom's punk rock older brother. It's completely impenetrable. What the sheep do is they take the biomass out of it, so it's actually possible to manage it. So that is a main focus as part of a cohort of our surrounding landowners, land owned by parks. This is a big part of what we do. And you can see as the grassland becomes healthy, this invasive colonizing species becomes less successful. And we're also harvesting native grass seeds, like you can see over here, planting them out and protecting them so that they can create a seed bank to start repopulating. This is also, I love this. This is spontaneous rewilding, some pontilia that you can see the dead gorse it's growing up out of. And then over here, this is really important. This is the medicine root. This is a sacred plant. And it's come back on its own. I didn't plant these. We're on the West Coast here. This is a fire ecology. Healthy fire is essential for wildlands here. But healthy fire requires fuel management. And we can do fuel management with grazing animals. We're in a massive drought here on the West Coast. We're in an unprecedented drought. That water could be in the soil. This is a little table that talks about carbon sequestration potential into the future, which you can ask me specific questions about it, but we're not going to get too sciencey today. And this here is just a sneak piece in handfuls. This is the soil we started with. This is what it looks like in mid-process. This is where it ends up. So all the carbon that's in the sky, it should be back in the dirt. And thankfully, we can put it back. And with the help of my family and my friends and a very supportive larger community, I'm privileged enough to get to spend most of my days doing that.
That's awesome.
Take it from here, Jay.
Thanks. Gowan, I'm just stoked to be here. I'm just blessed to be with you in the Mountain Lion Foundation. So I'm glad you went first in some way. Now we get to kind of just dovetail off of what you said while I'm kind of speaking here. Let me pull up. Let me share my screen. I'll do the same thing, but for our own context. Let me see. Let's see. Can you guys see just the screen, or do you see the back end? I see the presentation.
There you go.
You got it. Cool. In the same fashion, I'll walk through our work. My wife and I were from Eastern United States, Central Virginia. We farm in what we understand to be the Piedmont region of the United States. It's an unbelievably precious area. We have the Appalachian Mountains about 30 miles east and like Atlantic coastline 30 miles west, and then Atlantic coastline 30 miles east. And so we sit right in this transition period, right as Atlantic coastline goes up to mountainous forests. At elevations that on the East Coast are pretty great, 5,000 to 6,000 feet above sea level. And so that's where we are, Timshel Wildland. So we're a 400-acre regenerative, process-led, emergent conservation landscape. A bunch of words you probably don't hear a lot of regenerative farmers uttering today. When we transitioned our farm, if you will, into what we call lovingly the wildland, because we had no other word to describe what we were doing, a lot of farmers actually got really mad at us. I just wrote the book. I see we're already giving some copies away. I wrote this book, Wild Like Flowers, The Restoration of Relationship Through Regeneration. And in the book, I highlight some of these emails that were sent to us. Like, we've domesticated bovine for the last 10,000 years, and you're screwing it up. Why are you trying to rewild these animals? Why are you partnering with the natural world? Why are you not trying to control it and get this product out? We worked so hard and you're ruining it. And I'll never forget my wife, Morgan, she's more of the brilliant operator in our system. She put her phone down. She was reading the email on her phone. She said, yeah, they've got it. We're trying to ruin their system. That's exactly what this is. And so, well, anyways, Tim Shawadlin, I'll walk through some slides. There's some pictures of our family. It's a family operation. My wife and our family live here. My mom and my dad live on the farm right now. My sister and her husband are living on the farm for about a year, given some health issues. And so it's a family-based operation, but it really is, if I could describe it this way, then I'll show some pictures, an attempt to illustrate that cattle and butterflies, pigs and ground nesting birds, pasture grasses, shrubs and trees and briars and brambles, that it can do better than just coexist together. That in fact, that we can use these systems to nurture these systems via community to actually co-create, not just coexist, but co-create a much more beautiful world. I love Charles Eisenstein, a brilliant writer of today. He has a book titled The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. I think that title of a book is just unbelievably potent. But that's a co-creative power, right? And we see the same thing with predators too. People in our area, they shoot black bear and coyotes. Those are really the predator species that we have in the eastern coast. Mountain lions are more or less extinct here. And they just, why don't you shoot these predators? Why don't you X, Y? I mean, and it's about co-creation, right? We're not trying to limit the predators so we maximize the product coming out of our cow-calf operation, right? The predators are a part of our cow-calf operation in as much as we are. And so that's the way we see it. It's a collaborative system based in co-creation and emergence, and therefore community. I'll move forward. Yeah, like Gowan said, we're all working off of rural satellite internet, so I apologize if these slides are just a couple seconds behind. I'm just happy to be here. This is great, given internet and everything else. But this is our family. Our oldest daughter, Elowen, our middle son there in the middle with the ponytail, he's Tecumseh, and the youngest, she's 6 months old, she's Sequoia. So we have Elowen, Tecumseh, Sequoia, Morgan, and myself. We believe the harvest, right, to actually take nutrients out of a system, we must first become the system. Only when we're a part of the system can we get feed from that system, nourishment, community. And so regenerative agriculture, and this is really the subtitle of my book, if it is about anything at all, it's about relationship, right? Becoming the wild itself, and there and only there in the community of the thing can regeneration occur. But another idea that we talked about a lot is to see the remarkable. Right? The remarkable is all around us. Farmers, I think today, especially coming out of this agricultural revolution that has been the last 10,000 years, we're focused on controlling ecosystem process, because only when we control the processes of an ecosystem can we harvest. At least that's the way it's been popularly perceived. But we can only create the remarkable. That's the extension of that rhetoric. And we like to flip that on its head here at Tim Shawadlin. No. We don't create the remarkable. We get to see it, right? Just to open our eyes, we get to see the magic of everything that's around us. And so we love that phrase. The last here, this is me loving on one of our cows, Samara. All of our cows are named, which is probably another thing you don't hear a lot of regenerative farmers talking about today. We have hundreds of cows and they're all named. This is Samara. But healthy soil, right, is a product of healthy communities. If this webinar has 4 or 5 or 6 different words, that you could like tack and just count and tally how many times I say them on this webinar. Community, being a product, relationship, you're going to hear this too often. But it's really true. And to both Gowan and our operations, healthy soil, right, it is not the thing that we're pushing for. Healthy soil is in many ways a derivative of healthy community function, right? And so when we're talking about healthy soil, we're talking about a biodiverse community working forward in a resilient system through succession, right, to a truly resilient system, a regenerative system. And so anyways, pictures of cute kids. We focus on epigenetics, really interesting stuff. I'll keep moving forward. Emergence, right? This is cows grazing under the overstory of these gorgeous 350-year-old white oaks. Just a truly marvelous spectacle on the East Coast. I heard this forester tell me the other day that only 8% of the standing hardwoods still exist over the last 50-year period on the eastern United States. That's how much cut forests have occurred. So anyways, these are giants in our landscape. But these cows are grazing a wildflower pasture. This is crownbeard, a native weed that's heavily herbicided in our region that every fall we let develop and go to seed and express itself. And we just have hundreds of acres of these gorgeous, gorgeous wildflower meadows. We counted over 100 monarch butterflies in like 100-step walk one autumn. Just unbelievably gorgeous. But we're using cows, right, in a regenerative, truly holistic system to foster this sort of result, which is truly special. We focus on community. We have all sorts of glamping and camping sites all over the wildland where people can come just kind of shed off the pains and, humdrummery of civilization in cities and just camp and breathe and, that kind of stuff. And observation, this is important. Bigger conversations, I'll keep moving for time's sake. But anyways, show you a quick couple pictures. So we raise 100% grass-born, fed, and finished cows. That means that every product we sell out of our farm, if you want to use that terminology, is born on our farm. So there's a true relationship there. More cows, happy, wonderful, gorgeous cows. And sheep, we raise the same grass-born, fed, and finished hair sheep. Wonderful kids. This is Elowen, when she's 2 years old. She's helping herd the sheep. Just so cool to see like kids grow up in this sort of system where they can take your farming hat, put it on, and run through the pastures. Just so unbelievably special. And then we raise what I like to call wild ass hogs. These pigs are raised in a truly wild system. We put them on hundreds of acres with a perimeter fence around it that's only 2 or 3 feet tall, so that wildlife can move through the system. Okay, thanks, Jessica. I'll move a little bit slower on the slides. But they have access to roam and truly express themselves. So like right now, we have about 15 breedable pigs, sows, we call them in the farming community. One boar foraging about 100 acres of this forest land. And so they spread out, they form cliques, just like in many ways a predator would. Because pigs in this area of the world are definitely not prey species. And so there's cool realities there. Also, all of our animals are born in the wild. There's a story in the book that I find really interesting to note here. One time we witnessed a cow give birth to a calf. We named it Banyan. I think it means protector. A blessing. Excuse me. Banyan is an Irish word, Celtic, meaning blessing. And while it was being born, Branya, the mom's previous daughter, now a heifer calf, all of her cows have horns, were watching. She was kind of pivoted towards the backside of Branya, her mom, and there was a black bear about 100 yards in front of it, just watching this whole thing happen. And Blythe, the daughter, Branya's horned heifer, was stomping her foot, kind of snorting while the calf was being born. She was protecting her brother. And it's this cool relationship that happens when you truly let this herd develop, right? Predators are all around us, but they also can coexist and co-create a much more beautiful world, right? Blythe was protecting her new brother, and Branya was happy. And sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes it does, right? That's part of the co-creation, the emergence. And that's it. That's it. I'll stop talking about ourselves because I'm much more interested in talking to Gowan. There it is.
Thank you so much, you guys. Those slides really are, both of your farms are gorgeous. It's heaven on earth. And it's so amazing to see those photos. You two have such an incredible relationship with your animals. Can you maybe explain to our guests why lions are so essential for a healthy ecosystem, even including a grazed one?
You want to attack this first, Gowan?
Sure. So I'm really lucky to live in a landscape where we have lions. I love that. They're one of my favorite things about what I do. And every time I see one on a game camera, my heart just goes wild, like it the very first time. So I think something that is really, really critical about these lions, to give a little bit of context, my grandpa was here during the Great Depression. And what he told me about that time was that this place was completely stripped, like stripped. My great grandmother used to send him out with a shotgun to shoot blue jays and songbirds that they would boil and then strain the bones out and drink the broth. And that's how bad it was. And what he says is like, we can't imagine how devastated it was ecologically. And they were shooting every mountain lion they could see. And they're still here. So one of the feelings that I have is that I hear this a lot from my peers and from my neighbors. There's never been this many before. There's so many here compared to when I was growing up. Yes, we are 2 generations removed from almost complete annihilation. You know, return is not invasion. Like recovery is not a problem, you know? So I think that context is really important. We're coming up to some of the very first reactions to the fact that there are now some protections, very few, but some protections. So we're getting a little bit of population recovery, and I see a lot of anxiety around it. But I also see what happens when people shoot adult mountain lions. And I have lived closely with an adult female mountain lion who claimed the land that we're on is her territory, and we got along just fine. She never took a single lamb. We were good. And then I also saw what happened after she was shot, which is that this territory became vacant and it became fought over by roving young lions that were less well-fed, less confident. We had more lion presence and more losses to our neighbors in the aftermath of the shooting of an adult lion than we did before. So personally, I think the best thing that you could have as a sheep rancher, as a livestock farmer, is a mature, healthy adult lion claiming your territory. It's a huge asset.
That's for Gowan, I think that phrase "return is not invasion," that like sent chills down my spine. That I see in the chat here that it's doing the same thing for other people. That is an awesome line. Because here on the Eastern Coast, and that's the reason I kind of pivoted in the beginning to you, is we don't have mountain lions here. They have absolutely been eradicated. They're an extinct species in our area of the world. And I always tell folks, we don't have the luxury of having mountain lions, of true apex predators. We have coyotes and black bears, which definitely are not true apex predators. You know, when it comes down to the importance of mountain lions, right, the way we see it, is from that apex predator context, right? So in a regenerative system, and I don't mean this from an agricultural perspective or the regenerative movement that you see all over the social media news today in terms of carbon farming and such. I mean, in a truly natural system, a system that is cyclic, right? Where things are born, they grow, they live, they die, and then they're reborn, right? It's that rebirth process, right? That is where we focus. That is where health, right, is not just created, but sustained. And so in order to have rebirth, we have to also have death. This is something that a lot of farmers, a lot of people, I think in the, you know, in the world we live in today are a little bit uncomfortable with the role of death in an ecosystem, especially the human ecosystem, bigger subjects. But the point is an apex predator, right, they're turning waste, right, this undead life that needs to die to enter the cycle and be reborn into rebirth itself. Right, we had I think we had 2 ewes. I was going to say 1, but I think it was actually 2 ewes that were called this year, and their waste and their hides and things. We put in a pile and we've set up a game camera deep in our landscape, about 2 miles from any other farms or anything else, just really deep in our land. And we set up these game cameras because we wanted to see which predators came first. And every day we went out and we checked these game cameras, and there was nothing. And nothing. 5 days went by, and then all of a sudden the carcasses started to move and the maggots came in. And my wife, a true field biologist, an educated field biologist, she was looking at this stuff and she's like, Daniel, maggots these are our predators. Like, we have so utterly disrupted, colonized, settled, conquered, right? The predator system in this ecosystem, right? The Piedmont region, the Eastern United States, the Mid-Atlantic, whatever you want to call it, that maggots are our only life, death, rebirth activators, right? So our regenerative system here is locked into life. Then it dies and it takes years to regenerate. It takes years to regenerate. And so when we're talking to local farmers, right, and they're out, they have shotguns in their cars to shoot any single coyote they ever see, regardless of any reason, right? They get a high from it, I guess. I don't know. We're praying for coyotes. We're praying for black bears. We're praying for a mountain lion to return. I remember Morgan was driving out of our farm one day, and you pull out this big field, and she thought she saw this mountain lion go by. I don't know if it was a bobcat or a cat or a stray dog, or maybe it was a mountain lion. And she called me, just hysteric. Daniel, like, there's a mountain lion here. You're not going to believe. You got to come out right now. We got to get game cameras in this reed. Like, is this a mountain? She was so excited, right? And it's not because this is like a cool thing as an isolated event in and of itself, right? But it's an apex predator as a member of a community that is taking life to death to rebirth, right? And it's that predator, right? That role as a predator that instigates, right, that rebirth process, which is everything, absolutely everything.
Yeah, that's how I feel about wolves. I deeply, like, when I think about the changes that happened in, my grandfather's lifetime into his mid-90s, or, my grandmother's, who's now in her 90s as well, how much happened in that time. The first grocery store, like, that as a concept didn't exist when they were born. So talk about, food distribution from that perspective. If I could see wolves and a free living herd of elk here before I die, what could be better than that?
Right. Right.
I think that the thing is that, there's a sense of loss of control. Something could take your livestock without your permission. But the thing that I kind of struggle with, especially around here, the number one animal that behaves badly with our sheep is actually people's dogs. Loose domestic dogs are a way bigger issue than coyotes are at all. And we live with tons of coyotes. There's huge packs of coyotes. And I kind of became visible as the local rancher who likes coyotes. And, I get people mad at me too. Super mad at me, actually. The county trappers very much does not like me. Including people sending me photos of their, like, dead livestock, being like, you're saying you're fine with this? I'm looking at it and I'm like, I can 100% promise you that was a dog. Like, so there's this sense of the other and the outside that is the reason why these bad things are happening to us. And most of the time, the call is coming from inside the house. And in the same way that it's like, sure, okay, if you don't have lions as a predator because you've completely sanitized this environment, you're going to have microbes. Your sheep are going to get pathogens. They're going to get parasites. Like, we don't live, in a safe world. If you want to completely, contain these animals, put them where nothing can ever get to them, surround them in concrete, put them in a building, what will start be, like the maggots that become your predators, what will happen is on the micro scale, and you don't get away from it by getting away from livestock either. Right. We live in a world that is doing everything it possibly can to swallow the sun, and there will be a way that happens. You can't take it away. You can just you can remove complexity. You can make it a lot less interesting, and you can impoverish yourself and everyone around you, but you can't stop it.
Yeah, that's the direct derivative, right? That's the direct resultant of decreasing complexity, right? Is impoverish, right? Impoverished environment. That's really interesting. I think if there's a real deep conversation to be had, it's and perhaps this is the medium to have it. It's that word stock. I think I've used it, you've used it, right? I think a lot of farmers, right, conventional all the way through, some regenerative farmers, they see their animals as their animals, right? Just like I have my money in the stock market, I have my animals, which I call my stock, right? This is an issue, right? We are commoditizing the natural world. This is capitalism gone way too far, or it's just capitalism, depending on what we understand to be true. Won't go there. But the point is, right, when a black bear or coyote in our context, or a mountain lion in yours, takes a calf, right? I mean, it's not my calf. I don't see it as my calf, right? And don't get me wrong, it hurts, right? But all death, right? I'll say this differently. This is a kind of a paraphrase of something I heard recently in a conversation. But when you take a life, especially for nourishment, you are responsible for the continuation of that life's community, for that life's story, right? And that phrase, right? If commercial agriculture is negative for one reason, it's not glyphosate and paraquat, right? It's not deep erosion gullies. These things are all existent. It's not that glyphosate is now in the rain and the climate is trying to kick us out. Those are all true. And those are all direct resultants of commercialized agriculture. Absolutely. Or just agriculture in general. But the real heart of the matter, the real issue here is a philosophic, it's a poetic issue. It's a hard issue, right? And it's that we are not good at understanding that life is a story, life operates in community. And when that life is taken, right, the taker of that life is responsible for the continuation of that community, right? And so if that predator species, right, and if regenerative agriculture practically is built on anything at all, is that predators naturally in nature push prey species forward and onward constantly. And they put them in deep bunches. We call it mob grazing, right? These are some terms maybe people have heard. But the idea is that predators are pushing prey species. We have the prey species, we don't have the predators, and we wonder why this isn't working, right? It's because we shoot the predators when they take one of our calves, right? This doesn't make any sense. What mainstream regenerative rhetoric, and I've stuck my neck out and said this, and don't get me wrong, I've gotten emails that are quite nasty, but it's that regenerative movement, Joel Salatin and other people have built this movement off of the idea that predators push prey animals naturally in nature. They call it mob grazing. They have all of these sayings that they use, and they're fine. It's all true. But something that we have to understand is if predators are pushing prey animals naturally in nature, that the wake behind those prey species mobbing and moving constantly forward, it's not animal impact, it's not soil health, it's not regenerating grasslands, and it's not a biodiverse region. There's a lot of death back there because the predators have to eat something, and they're constantly there, they're omnipresent, and they're pushing the prey species forward, right? And so death has to be existent in a healthily functioning ecosystem. And that death, if you're not okay with maggots being your apex predators, we need apex predators, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's 50 to 90% of every ruminant baby born in a year doesn't make it to its first year in a state of nature. And that is the way it has to be based on their rates of reproduction. You know, they know this. I mean, it's the same abundance scale that exists everywhere else in nature. I mean, if one mustard plant makes 100,000 seeds and every single one of them lives to maturity, there's nothing but mustard plants in the entire world.
Right.
Abundance is based into the system. Loss is based in the system. But something that you said, I have heard that saying too, of like, when you take life, you're responsible for the continuation of that life's community. I deeply, deeply believe that. And actually, it's largely why I stopped farming vegetables on a large scale. Because looking around, I couldn't do that. You know, when you plow a field, how do you then return the community of the badgers, the burrowing owls, you know, the diglostemma, the bunch grasses, the burrowing bees, you know, the foxes. I think you can't how, you know, and I think that there's this idea that somewhere there's some untouched, pristine land where all these systems are going on, and it's not true. It's not true here in the West, where we actually do have huge amounts of public land. That land has co-evolved with management and with large grazers that are currently not there and are being suppressed and not allowed here. So that land is not maintaining itself. You know, John Muir was wrong. You know, John Muir had a huge appreciation for beauty. he was also a
by the way.
racist, and he did not understand what he was seeing.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know how else to say it other than that bluntly. There is no magical place where the plowed land is accounted for and the community is returned. It isn't happening. Where it is happening
Right.
is in managed pasture land.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We were mentioned so I wrote Wild Like Flowers, right? So we're kind of giving those away. It's kind of cool. I also wrote a history of the early American West, and it's actually very poorly reviewed. It's really upon the context, the character of Daniel Boone, to set the stage, to really build the narrative, and then it's really about the American West. Well, anyways, people hate this book because it argues a lot of what you're saying. John Locke, today, bring up John Locke, right, and say that maybe he wasn't the most brilliant man that ever lived. And a lot of conservatives are like, oh my gosh, like this is unbelievable. And don't get me wrong, I was a political science and history major in college. I believe in the American political system. I think constitutional republics make a lot more sense than fascist like, I get it. Like, I'm not trying to be crazy here, but John Locke, right, he looks at the New World and he says, dudes, let's colonize this thing and make it really productive, because right now 1,000 acres in the New World isn't even worth 1 acre of cultivated land in England, right? And that's a problem. And there's more problems we don't have to get into. But the point.
Yeah.
Guys, I wanted to ask you a quick question if you were amenable to it. For those of us who are learning a little bit about what you do, how does a truly regenerative agriculture work to heal communities? Farmed, wild, human. Can you sort of go into that a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, some very practical tips on our place is improving species access. A lot of species who evolved here, we kind of see the ecosystems that they're existing in, and we assume that those are their preferred ecosystems rather than they're just managing to cling on there. What we've seen is that as we've restored pasture here, as we've removed invasive species, as we've returned native species, our deer population has just gone through the roof. And we get to the point where it's like, we really need lions here, or we're going to be tripping over deer. And just kind of creating the context and bringing back some disturbance. A lot of our land, especially here on the West Coast, it's either it's been untouched and it has stagnated. It's oxidizing chemically because we're dry out here, so it's just, that isn't a healthy state of being. Or it's been over impacted for too long. When you drive by and you just see like a sad horse standing in a sad field that is dirt, that's over impact for too long. So I think a key thing that regenerative agriculture can do, and I agree with Daniel that like kind of the central conceit of regenerative agriculture is that we're mimicking wolves and we're moving ruminants around, which we have all kinds of evidence that is what our species has done for all of time. It's kind of why we like dogs. It's sort of why we and dogs made each other. So I agree with that. But what ends up happening if you're observant is not just simple. It's not just that you're getting better forage production per acre. It's not just that, you can graze longer into the dry season. It's that you're going to have other species return. And that's really where it should be. And to me personally, I think the bleeding edge of regenerative agriculture is native ungulates. And that is something that I don't hear enough about, but I think we will in 10 years.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, so the land that we farm, Timshall Wildland, it's a transitioning horse farm that turned cattle farm, that turned 10 years of neglected land that we are now working for the past half a decade or so to truly regenerate, to partner with, to become really. But we practice holistic management on our farm, and part of holistic management is what we call ecological monitoring, where we employ these pretty cool scientific measuring tools and observation techniques to really analyze the communities that are around us. It's special stuff, but gets complex from there, so I'll put the pin on that. But the point is, the first year we did it, year one, so 5 years ago, we counted about 2 or 3 different pastured species, grasses, herbaceous perennials, if you will, in these areas, right? So it was just more or less monocrop corn, but grass. Well, corn is still a grass, but just imagine a cornfield, right? That's what our pastures really were, was just a couple of species. This past September, we do ecological monitoring twice a year, once in the spring, once in the fall. We'll be doing it next week. We counted 179 species in the exact same area, and we're just talking grasses, right? This exact same area is that area I showed of our wildland with the cows and the wildflowers with the oaks. And I said we counted 100 monarch butterflies, right, in a 100-foot walk during that autumn season, right? So it's not just, 176 new pasture species emerging within the landscape from a grass perspective, but there's trees coming. We're seeing more coyote and black bear. We're seeing more butterflies and grasshoppers. Like, we actually have a grasshopper season now. That's new. That's pretty cool. Now you're driving through the pasture on a 4-wheeler to go move the cows or bring water, whatever you're doing. It's like boing, 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 boing. And you just like want to be catching all of them, being like, wow, where did you guys come from? This is unbelievable, right? And so life returns, right? When systems become cyclic, when they become healthy, it's like health follows, and health is a part of community. We always tell folks what we're pushing for is a uniform diversity, in the sense that diversity is uniform across the landscape, right? That's the vision of truly regenerative agriculture, of rewilding, if you will. To talk the human side for a minute, because that's a large part of what we focus on, as Gowan said, and I'm sure she totally agrees with this, humans have been managing landscapes for the history of the human species. Homo sapiens sapiens have been working animals in landscapes, managed burning, cultivating different areas. I mean, there's a vegetable, it's called the Afton groundnut, that we cultivate on our farm. It's one of the only native vegetable varieties that were cultivated by the Manahoac indigenous peoples who lived in a village not an eighth of a mile out this window, right? And it's called the Afton groundnut. Afton is the closest mountain or hill, depending on where you're from and what you think a 4,000-foot elevation mound would be, but we call it a mountain, Afton Mountain. It's where this vegetable was really found. And so, I don't know why I'm talking about that, but the point is, humans, right, we need to be managing landscapes. And the issue is, in degenerating rural landscapes, you see a lot of species biodiversity loss, but one of the species biodiversity losses that we see most prevalent is humans. There's no humans out here, right? No humans want to stay. We're surrounded by old people. We're the youngest couple in our entire city, right? And I'm 30 years old. And when our daughter Elowen was born a couple of years ago, our neighbor called us. He's 85 years old. And he said, Daniel, that is the first child born in this city that I can remember, 1980s, 1990s. This is the first, right? So we have a human problem. If humans are needed to nurture environment, right? If ecosystem resilience succession is dependent upon impact, and part of that impact is from the Homo sapiens sapiens species, right? That we need to get people back in the landscape. But the question is, and now it's mathematical, we can talk poetically, philosophically, but we also have a mathematical issue. If you have 3 species in a pasture and a drought happens, you have no pasture. If you have 179 species in a pasture and a drought happens, you might have some pasture plants left. So now our land is able to support more Homo sapiens sapiens species life because it's more productive, right? So just by enhancing the productive carrying capacity of your landscape, which sounds capitalistic, it even sounds like we're commoditizing the natural world, but it leads to more humans in the landscape, which is a perfectly fine step. We get more humans out, more people come to work on the farm, more people are acquiring the land around the farm to build communities and intentional communities and communes or whatever they're doing. It's all marvelous. We need more people in the rural landscape. We need a rural economic regeneration for ecologic regeneration to happen. And so it's multifold, and it's very complex, but very, as you probably can tell by the way I'm speaking and kind of get a little more passionate than I have been, it's very important.
It's incredibly important. And, I think that it starts to create the possibility for meaningful land return to happen as well. When we actually have native species present, once there actually is there becomes space for like culturally significant species to be present, both plants and animals and otherwise. And then we can really meaningfully start creating a template for land return.
Absolutely.
Can you correlate relationship and community with food production? Because that would be a wonderful thing to sort of elaborate on.
Yeah, I'll jump in the front of this for the first time, Gowan, if you don't mind. Relationship, there's an interesting chapter in my book. It's probably one of the more contested chapters because the chapter concludes that we really need to see our dining room tables as communal spaces, and not just for more humans, but all of life is animate. And as long as all life is animate, right, that a dining room table, right, is really a depiction of much life, right, a plethora of life, a cornucopia of life, right? And when cows are animate, right, when cows have a role to play in an ecosystem, and when a cow has a name, when you're eating a pound of ground beef, you're not eating a pound of ground beef, right? You're eating something so much more, and you're responsible for it. And so the chapter concludes by saying we need a lot more chairs at the table, not just for humans, but for Amen, right? It's one of our bulls. We call him steers because it's just the lingo, but he's a bull, fully intact bull. He's out in the field and he's going to be eaten, right? His context is to be food for both wildlife. We leave his entrails and a bunch of other things in the field for the wildlife to consume, and we consume some of the organs and the meats and the bone. But his name is Amen, right? And sooner than later, Amen is going to be at the dining room table of a black bear and a human, right? And this is very important. And so from a community and relationship level, that is food, right? And as we talked about earlier, to nourish oneself with life through death so that rebirth can happen, right? That rebirth, right, is responsible for the continuation of that story, of that narrative, of that community. And so to nourish oneself is to extend the story of that community one step further, right? Maybe in conservation or ecology, we talk about trophic levels, right? As you work down this food chain, if you will, to use a very different word, But the idea is that everything is returned. And as long as it is returned, all life, rebirth can happen. And that is that community function. Now, stepping back again to be more human-centric, which is still very important, right? Around the table, right? Community, Dr. Zach Bush, he's a doctor out here that's very focused on holistic health and medicines and things. He recently released this incredible report that said a 30-second human-to-human hug before a meal will give you all the serotonin your body needs to not have cravings for carbohydrates and sugars during that meal. It will satiate your body's chemical desire for serotonin, which we derive from carbs and sugars through our meals, right? And it's only a 30-second hug, right? So what if food can be the community organizer, right? But also the healer, right? To both that community and to that community's innards, right? Their own microbiome, their own ecosystem. And then it gets complex. We can have many more conversations. But Gowan, I'll open up to you. I want to see where you go with this.
Yeah, I mean, I once I got asked to speak at a gathering of a bunch of ranchers and policymakers in our county and county employees about the science of ranching with wildlife. And there's a very, very strong and vocal old school contingent, many of whom are still ranching on lands that their immediate ancestors stole, who deeply believe that, of course, if you see a coyote, you shoot the coyote. And so we have this interesting conversation that then happens, so I'm saying, well, the science says that it doesn't work. If you've been doing it your whole life and your dad did it his whole life, and you're still doing it, and you're telling me that it's the only way that works, I guess it's job security, So we have this debate about it, and I'm saying things like, okay, well, if your cows are only susceptible to coyotes when they're calving, calve them in a more protected space, put up an electric fence, put up fox lights. Like, there are practical, simple things that you can do that in the long run, may save you more money than the cost of the calves. And what I hear from these old timers is, yeah, but that's so much more work. And like, yes, it is. Wouldn't that be great? You could actually hire somebody, you could actually bring more people onto the landscape. Some of these guys, they're managing tens of thousands of acres. Of course, they don't want to do anything innovative, because in their head, they're picturing themselves out there with, step-in posts and insulators that they don't know how to use. There's no space there for the next generation. And definitely when I was growing up here, there was no good news in agriculture. And the message that I got loud and clear was that success would mean leaving. It would mean leaving. It would mean learning how to talk like you're not from there. It would mean going to the city. And what I see now, this like renaissance that's happening, young farmers and ranchers, young indigenous people out on the landscape, working with like both introduced species and native species in this way that is like excited and energized, and there's presence happening. I couldn't even have imagined that growing up. It's not always a bad thing to have things be more work. You can have more humans there too. And I think that is often the part that gets left out, is that, especially the kind of old school rancher mentality, they're used to getting bargain basement prices, and that's that old joke of like, who buys retail, sells wholesale, and pays the freight both ways. That's what they're used to, and the idea that actually there's a completely different way to handle economics, there's a completely different way to think about labor. I think it's really challenging for that old guard to get their head around that, because they're so used to this very marginalized existence where they aren't really they aren't really respected by the larger community, and they're so used to clinging to survival, they're very risk averse. So I think that there needs to be some gentleness, and then there also needs to be just working like heck to create land access.
Yeah. Absolutely. And healthy environments, right? Or I should say healing ecosystems are, in my opinion, one of the best ways to truly make land accessible, right? Because what you are doing, as you outlined, is you're creating a people problem, right? If we had 3 species to graze in the beginning, now we have 179, I can have a lot more cows. But if I have a lot more cows or sheep or pigs or chickens or ducks, whatever it is, goats, if I can have a lot more animals to support in this landscape, to eat all of that forage, I need more people to manage those animals, right? So as systems become more complex, right, we need more life in those systems to support the complexity, right? And that's the beautiful thing about life economics, or just natural economics, or just nature itself. Take the idea of economics out of it, right? Is as systems grow in resilience through successional stages, through a regenerative cycle, meaning that it's cyclic, right? That life turns into death, which turns into rebirth, right? We need more life to feed life. And in that way, life is its own nourishment, right? And part of that life is, as you're saying, is that human element, which is exciting, very exciting.
Guys, would
Jessica?
you maybe explain to us how all regenerative farmers are not the same, how you differ from each other?
Yeah, but I think real first, I guess what I want to throw in is this morning before coming here, what I did right up until about 15 minutes before we logged on is I was with an intern crew from a nonprofit learning farm. They came up to spend the morning with me, and we did a sheep move, and none of them had done that before. I think one of them had maybe pet a sheep before, but they'd never moved with a group of animals across a landscape. And just watching those lights turn on, we're bipedal for a reason. We have the physiology that we have for a reason. We evolved to do this. It is in us really deeply. And my background is in farm to school education. I ran a teaching farm for a long time, and that will never get old to me. I love that so much. And to actually walk with a group of large herbivores, from a paddock to a new paddock, it's impactful. And when I think about the fact that there are so many people that never experience that, that feels really sad. And I think it would be amazing if we needed more help all the time. And it would be great if people that are living in urban environments were, you know, headed out to the country on the weekends. It's not a bad thing, you know. Before petroleum, and honestly, like, it's petroleum and slavery. If you don't have petroleum and you don't have slavery, everybody has to work on food, you know, and we might end up in a situation where we just can't support people that aren't working on food in some way at some part of their day.
Yeah. Wendell Berry, by the way, has part in his book. I can't remember the book or the essay, but he's talking to this rich fella who's some financier, some mathematical genius in terms of stock market or finance or something. And he's writing this narrative, and the stock guy is like, "Oh, you wouldn't understand how amazing I am at working numbers, whatever it is." And Barry's like, "So have you ever grown a vegetable?" And he's like, No. I pay people to do that. You don't understand. I'm really good at working with fire. And he's like, "Have you ever made a fire without matches, or do you know how to survive a night like in the woods without just freezing to death?" Not that everybody needs to have extreme capabilities there, or that managing finance in the stock market is inherently bad. None of those things are true, and that's not Barry's point, right? It's that humans, right, are a part of ecosystem function, and as long as that's true, our future is in the nourishment of all of the ecosystem, which includes ourselves. And you're absolutely right. Without slavery or petroleum, we're all the cultivators of food, right? Because that's the only thing we need in this world is nourishment. Sometimes that nourishment is heat. Sometimes it's, cooling type systems, but a lot of the times it's food. I like that though.
And
that's really good. I didn't, but keep going.
Not just 100% better. like, wouldn't we rather have that? Like, when we start to talk about like social equity, when we start to talk about the environment, you know, when we start to talk about apex predators, yeah, different things are required from us in order to live in the world that we want to live in. We're going to have to be able to handle that.
Yeah. And Jessica, I'll kind of dive into your question too, because it's very potent to me. As I've alluded already in this webinar multiple times, when we shifted over from the terminology, the vocabulary of a farm to a wildland, we really did get a lot of emails. This is not some poetic way of saying that the world doesn't like us as much anymore. I mean, it is true. Like, we really got emails. And at first we were stunned, like, why does it matter? So for instance, we have some philosophies or tenets, call them, when a boy is born, we don't castrate him, we never wean, we don't separate animals, we run herd, we barely do anything to them, we're really focused on rewilding. There's some interesting points there that true farmers, and especially regenerative agricultural farmers, are not comfortable with, right? And so there is a true deviation, a split within the regenerative agricultural movement. And I don't mean it's a split in a good way or a bad way. There's not evil and positive one way or the other. There's just a split. It's an inherent contextual split. And that is beautiful, right? Context is very, very important. It really is the foundation of everything that we do, is context. But there is that split there. And so, like, I would imagine a lot of people on this webinar would be perturbed or taken back to hear that, like, our wildland, we're a regional hub of the Savory Institute. We work with Alan Savory and his team all across the globe to regenerate grasslands. And a lot of people get a very bad taste in their mouth when they hear this, right? And it's understanding that context portion, right? And I'm not saying everybody in Regen Ag is bad or good, or everybody in Savory is bad or good. The point is, right, is that we're all on this journey, right? As a human species, we're trying to work with succession. In many ways, we're trying to work back in succession, right? Because I think we've gone too far. We're conquerors and colonizers when we were never built to do this. But we're on that contextualized journey. And so, yes, we're different. The wildland is focused on other things than producing a cow-calf operation with a 95% breed back percentage, right? Our pigs, instead of farrowing twice a year, farrow once every other year. And that's okay, right? We should be having 4 farrowing cycles according to modern regenerative agricultural commercialized production than we are. And our sows are loving this, right? I mean, just as a father of 3 children and a lover of my wife, like, I get it, right? Like, the feminine, right? This is very important, and rushing that cycle, maximizing that cycle for profit doesn't make sense, right? It just doesn't. And so we're definitely different. I don't think that difference is a bad thing, right? And that's what I'm really trying to say here. Just because we don't castrate doesn't mean that Gowan should or should not. This is our context, right? And it's understanding of the whole manage. Go ahead. Go ahead. I see you jumping. Jump.
No, I'm literally just like, I'm really like stimulated by this conversation. I'm having a hard time not interjecting, but it's really funny because like I had never, I read Wildlife Flowers recently. It was last week. Lovely. But I had never heard of your farm. And I used to castrate for other people, especially when I was younger in like my late teens, early 20s. I was like handy with a Birdizo, and so not only would I do all my own, but I also like go up and down the coast, and it's just like, yep, you got them, I'll chop them. And, I really, I burnt out on it and decided to stop and see what would happen. And I do maintain 2 flocks, mostly because I understand that I'm really kind of forcing my animals to be in a group and not to dissipate as much as they would in the wild, talking about my sheep. And if all my rams are just in with all my ewes, they will fight and they will hurt each other really badly in a way that they don't when they're just in a single sex environment. And so I have a lot of thoughts about that. But it is really interesting when you do decide to let go of some aspects of control. Also such as not weaning. I mean, we had a bull who was like, he was still nursing at like 18 months. And he was this big old bull who was like, snorting and like posturing about how tough he was. And then he would like go over and nurse on his mom. It was really hilarious.
That's a bull.
It's like tough guy. But
yeah.
I think like the thing about how we're all not the same, our contexts are different. And you can look at that really simply in just what do we produce? Gabe Brown is a grain farmer. I am a fiber farmer. I actually don't sell meat. And a big part of why I don't sell lamb is because there is no USDA processing facility within 4 hours of me. And it's not part of my context to haul lambs over the hill. And because that's part of my context not to do that, I'm also limiting more breeding than I'm allowing. They would have way more sex if I let them. And the reason why I do that is because I can't provide the level of predation that they would need because I don't sell lamb. And it's an interesting thing because I occasionally run into people who like, they see the level of care and processing that goes into these fiber animals and the fact that I don't sell meat, and they think that I don't sell meat because I'm against meat. And I'm not against meat at all. I'm against 4-hour trailer rides. So everybody's,
for you and
and so everybody's context is going to be shaped by their community ecology and their physical ecology, and that's a good thing. And we do disagree, and we should disagree because our contexts are not the same.
Guys, we are reaching the time of our webinar where we get to let people ask some Q&As. So I'm pretty excited to see what people have to ask you. So we will switch tracks a little bit and we will let people ask some questions.
Roy has a question. Roy, please ask your question. Roy, did you have a question? We'll get back to him. Let's see.
Be muted.
Yeah. Let's jump to Molly. Please ask your question.
Hi there. So I was really taken with the idea of humans being a return species to rural ecology. And it, really hits me at a moment. I'm actually starting the trip today, now, first stop. My partner and I are moving from Oakland to Kentucky because we got priced out of the Bay with the pandemic, and so we're moving to his dad's widow's best friend's widow's farm. Basically, we're fixing up this old farmhouse, and we're going to be living on land that is home to a lot of species. Amongst them, there's about 200 head of cattle. Run by a one-woman operation. And I guess I have two questions. One, what advice do you have, just kind of generic, what advice do you have? Not so much about the land itself, which I know how to learn about a little bit, but I was realizing when you spoke about ecological return that, like, what I am most scared of is being the only queer person in who knows how many miles, being the only Jewish person within, and so there isn't a cultural landscape that supports the species I am. And that's like an interesting phrase to say. And so it struck me when you were talking about, this is the first child born here in a very long time, like, what does it look like to create a landscape where humans who haven't been in rural spaces, or the ones who grew up with the idea that success means leaving, like, what does that look like? Sorry for meandering a little bit. I'm sort of thinking and talking at the same time, but that's my question. How do you thrive in an ecology that's not necessarily meant for you culturally? That's what I want.
I adore you, and I'm so proud of you.
I wasn't going to say we're friends. You could act like we're strangers.
I think as a queer person in a rural area, I think part of it is this is just me speaking for myself here. Part of it is creating your niche and bringing your community with you. I think the cities have acted as a refuge for queer kids from, really in American culture, probably since like the 30s, if not beforehand. And I definitely remember the first time that I went to San Francisco and had this experience in the park where nobody was looking at us. We were just the most normal thing, and just the high of that. And that's not true in the country, and like I have a very diverse family, my family is Jewish and Kanaka and Black and white, and we're a mixed bag. And, part of it is understanding that you are, to a certain extent, if you choose to be visible, you become the one queer friend. And that is its own kind of labor, and it can be tiring. But the other part of it is that I actually think that, in my experience, rural people are more tolerant than they get credit for. You have to kind of put up with your neighbors when you're in the middle of nowhere. And, if there's the quirky guy that has like the weird yard art, and then there's the gays down the road, and you just become part of the landscape. There's some fear often associated with that, and sometimes it's really lonely. But another thing that I have tended to find is that if you create a little pocket of rural safety, they will come. There's such a deep longing for rural community in the queer community, they will come to you. And, I know beautiful, amazing queer people from, all over the place, including like the rural deep South, who have family members that love them and have places that they can be. So part of it is real specific risk management, and some of it really, though, I guess personally, I would say, like, lean into your online community, maintain your connections, but be ready for people to surprise you. You know, in a rural community, people might be showing up at your doorstep because there's been a flood or a fire or, you know, a tractor turnover. And when you get to that point of interdependence, the fact that you're queer might just be another weird thing about those kids from the city.
Yeah, again, I think that was brilliant. The only thing I'll add is really just a substantiation of what you said. On Mother's Day, I mean, we live out in the middle of nowhere. We're about 30 minutes really from anything, and that anything is really nothing. We're about an hour away from a gas station, things like that. And on Mother's Day, our neighbor, who's like 82, 83 years old, picked flowers and brought them over to our farm here. She's a neighbor, and gave them to my wife. Like that's crazy, right? But that was beautiful, and she was so ecstatic to give her those flowers. And you know, and their land right now is there's a Tyson chicken farm dumping manure in their back fields to plant, you know, monocrop, definitely GMO and not organic soybeans, right? So like we clearly have a difference of opinion, right? But there's true love there, right? All she wanted to do on Mother's Day as a grandmother herself was bring my wife flowers. That's just absolutely beautiful. So just like you were saying, Gowan, you know, Molly, just understand that people are people, you know, just like you. And in the rural setting, you're all they got. Big storm blew through. My neighbor called and said, Daniel, do you need help? We're not calling the fire department. We're not calling the police or a rescue squad. They're going to help me get out. That's it. That's all the options I got. So you develop that community. It's a forced community, but it's a marvelous community in most cases. So blessings your way. Moving to Kentucky, a beautiful, beautiful place.
Thanks.
We're not far, just so you know.
Oh, don't worry. I'm planning a visit already.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Try this again. Roy, did you have a question? Okay. He's unmuted.
Might be having some other audio issue. Could try the chat.
Yeah.
He's still in awe, Gowan, at your phrase, return is not invasion.
Oh,
Throwing that
gosh.
back out there.
While we wait to see if he'll type his question, we'll go to the next question.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you heard it here first. We got to put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah. Pamela, please ask your question.
Hi, this is fascinating and I really appreciate it. I'm wondering if either or both of the presenters have some suggestions on regenerative and wildlife friendly techniques for small acreage. I'm considering a 5-acre parcel in Southern Oregon. And I would appreciate any suggestions on resources so I can answer those questions myself as well. Thanks very much.
Yeah, 5 acres is a great scale. I think the first thing that I would say is native species. You know, native species association with insects is a huge foundation for a whole biodiversity cascade. And a lot of landscaping plants or introduced plants just don't have those like moth and butterfly and beetle associations. So, you know, first things first, native trees, native shrubs, and from there, it really it depends on the land base. But Daniel, I'm interested in your take on resources.
Yeah, resources. It's an interesting question. I would probably draw you more to like a homesteading community of actual human beings, not authors. I would imagine you're going to get a lot more success there. I know on the eastern United States here, there's a homesteading community that like I think is unbelievable. is just absolutely unbelievable. And what they're doing is very productive from a community sense, from a self-sufficiency sense, and from a farm business sense to some level. I don't know of any small scale like book publications that I would point you to. In a previous life, I was very into permaculture, studied with Jeff Lawton over in Australia, and you might see some good validity or success diving into some permaculture works. A lot of that is more writ, smaller scale, or at least it has a lot more success or less financial impediments at a smaller scale. I'm trying to think of a good permaculture book. I know one anymore.
Toby Hemingway, Gaia's Garden is my favorite of the Permy homestead scale books.
There you go.
He was a local before he passed away here, and just a really amazing man. And obviously he's talking a lot about cultivated plants, but I think that you would learn enough technique there that that you could really apply to anything.
Yeah. The beautiful thing about small scale, by the way, Pamela, and maybe Gowan would agree with this, is you are able, through very intentional design, and when I say design, I mean mimicking of the natural patterns surrounding your landscape, or maybe even contained within your landscape, but design nonetheless, create a truly regenerative system in place. And what I mean by that is you don't have to go off farm to bring in inputs to raise 200-300 head of cattle in a pasture-based environment, right? We're not totally getting all of the health right from our land base. We're importing nutrients, if you will. At a smaller scale through intentional design, and maybe Toby's book is a great place to start, through permaculture and other design type methodologies, you might be able to create a wonderfully native and pollinator friendly environment that self-fertilizes itself, in many ways taking the work a lot out of it, right? So like you can have a lot more fun in that space, right? The co-creation of energy, of nourishment without that much energy, right, put into the system. Yeah. So that would be too.
I totally agree with that. And I think the only other thing that I would throw in there, and like that's a really exciting journey. I'm excited for you, is take a lot of before pictures, which over here we're the worst at, but I personally, I would learn about game cameras early and get them set up and watch what happens over time. And you might be really surprised how literally putting in one feedstock plant for some beetles turns into you having predators there in a short period of time. So I recommend that just personally, because I think it's magical to get to watch it happen. So good luck.
Gowan, we have a request to repeat the author and title of the permaculture book that you mentioned. Could you repeat that for Pamela?
Sure. So the author is Toby Hemingway, and the author is the author of the book, and the title is Gaia's Garden, and it's a homestead scale permaculture design book. And the cool thing about his systems is that they could work with native plants, they could work with introduced plants, they could work with a mix of both, and they'd give you a good scaffolding if you want to add some domesticated animals too, or if you're really just looking to invite native animals.
Thank you, Gowan. It looks like we've reached the end of our questions for the Q&A. Do you guys have any thoughts that you'd like to leave us with? Anything you'd like to impress upon our guests before you go?
You want to go first, Daniel?
I know, I was thinking, and I don't know if this is too utopic. I believe it. I don't mean to cast some massive vision, and it kind of sounds cliche, but like I have a lot of hope. And I don't know if that is helpful for people to hear, but I do. My wife's a field biologist. I'm a poet, really. We met in the middle and called it wilding. And we're seeing that it's working, right? And what Gowan is describing is nature working, right? And part of it's losing control. Part of it is that Homo sapiens sapiens are starting to figure out their role within the natural world. And as we develop and emerge and adapt and evolve with this natural world, hopefully the word nature comes out of it, and it's just the world, because it is just one whole that we work within, and we're just one aspect. But it's hopeful, right? We're seeing success. We're seeing communities revitalized. We're seeing people coming back to the landscape. We're seeing predators return. We're seeing 3 turning into 179 different pasture plants in one measuring technique alone, right? And whether or not you're looking at it from we must have more monarch butterflies in the eastern United States or mountain lions returning. And no matter what lens you put on to look at the whole returning, the whole is returning. And it's a simply beautiful reality. So anyways, I don't know if this Thursday afternoon, like, it's possible, like, it's okay. The world is potentially, we can make it go in the right direction. We're not all going to be, eating goop on Mars in a couple of years. Like, maybe this is what we need to hear, but like, it's what I'm casting. So there it is. There's hope.
Yeah. I thank you, Daniel. And I really appreciate getting to have this conversation. And I think that, I would leave everyone with that too. And there's actually a book called The Ends of the Earth that I kind of return to as like a comfort read, which it's not about regenerative agriculture. It's about mass extinctions. And I love that book for the simple fact that it puts everything that we do into context. There were times in Earth's history when we couldn't survive breathing the air. There were times of massive vulcanization where it was dark for years. And look at all the abundance that exists around us. And I think that one thing that will happen, to quote the eminent scientist Ian Malcolm, is that, life is going to find a way. And I have hope in that too. Whatever landscape ends up occurring, there will be apex predators in it. Personally, I would rather have them be mountain lions than maggots. And I'm going to keep working towards that goal. But life is going to do what life does. And we're here to be in service of it. We are an expression of it. I think that it's important for those of us who are in the position of managing land to have these like direct confrontations and learn that humility and get into that direct relationship. And I see that happening. When I look at the discourse, when I look at, the books that are being published, when I look at what's happening out in the world, like, that's really what I see. So I just appreciate everybody here so much. And I wish you all a fat, sassy, mature female mountain lion in your rangeland.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Gowan. We really appreciate you being here. And we want to remind our guests that this is not the last you will see of Gowan and Daniel. We hope to have them many more times join us and share a lot of information with us that we think is really, really valuable to both the ecosystem and to the lion. So we look forward to having both of you back again.
Thank you.
It's a blessing and a privilege. Thank you, guys. Really, and the entire Mountain Lion Foundation. It's a privilege to work with you guys, not just around, but truly with and partner with you in this. So thank you again.
Thanks so much, guys.
All right. Have a good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. My name's Deborah. I'm the CEO of the Mountain Lion Foundation. Our panelists were fabulous. Like Jessica mentioned, we believe we'll be able to bring them back. If you want to see a great video about coexistence on the land, you can go to our website and check it out. Gowan was featured in that video as well. We will continue this conversation. We plan on having a lot of different webinars on how to farm with the wild, how to help protect our predators while we still are serving our communities. So thanks again. And remember to get the book if you can. Remember to go to our website and check out all the wonderful things we have going on there. Bye-bye now.